In the state of Kentucky, there is a cave that every now and then demands a sacrifice. January 30th, 1925. A man walks towards the cave with a kerosene lamp in his hand. He hangs up his jacket and ducks into a 5-foot opening. The inside of the cave is narrow. He has to drop down on his hands and knees, crawling through a passageway filled with jagged rocks and choking dust. Then down a chute he had cleared out months earlier. All of the daylight is gone from here, and this lantern is his only source of light. Ignoring the loose limestone rocks perched directly above him, he is now 100 feet in, and here he reaches the turnaround room. Now they call this the turnaround room because this is the juncture where even experienced cavers say, no thanks, and turn around. Because to continue on means going through this, the squeeze, a gap in the stone of only 9 inches. For reference, here's a subway sub. Going through, he would look exactly like this. His arms will need to be completely at their side, and he will need to exhale so that he can reduce the size of his torso. Gradually, bit by bit, he disappears into the hole. His clothes are caught on sharp gypsum crystals, hooking into him and threatening to hold him in place. But using his feet like paddles, he pushes through. He reaches a wider opening at the other side, then crawls forward towards a ledge. Illuminated here is a 10-foot drop. A rope is already secured around a boulder, which allows him to rappel down. His worn-out leather shoes touch the ground. This is as far as he can go, and it is time for work to begin. What he is working on is another opening. At the moment, it's too small for anyone to fit through, but he will chip away at it until he can shove himself right through the other side. Because on the other side is this. A magnificent and otherworldly cave structure that will be irresistible to tourists. Every day for months he has been removing rocks from this crevice. To him, this is all just routine. So he eases further into the gap. Carefully he contorts his body through. Rocks compress the sides of his torso so close that his arms are pinned to the side of his body. He once again paddles his feet to inch down. Then, about halfway, he stops. The lantern. It's starting to dim. He will need to go all the way back to the surface to refuel the thing. He sighs. He slowly shuffles back out, pushing the lantern with his shoulder. Then, oh no. Ding, crack, darkness. He has knocked over the lamp, and it has broken. Now the man didn't panic. He had been caught in the dark before, and he could make his way back by feel alone. So he continues worming out, leveraging his foot against what he thinks is the cave wall. But that is not the cave wall. That is in fact a rock protruding from the ceiling. As soon as he puts his weight against the rock, it breaks loose. A solid piece weighing 15 kilograms lands directly on his ankle. It aches. But he's okay. It doesn't feel as though his ankle is broken, just badly bruised and caught underneath the rock. So he shuffles to move the rock away. Suddenly, gravel. A lot of gravel. It falls onto his feet, his legs, his torso, and the weight of it all forces the wedged rock deeper into the gap underneath his foot. Pinned. He tries to push forward. He cannot. He tries to inch backwards. He cannot. He is stuck. This is Sand Cave. This man is Floyd Collins. He is trapped in absolute darkness, 60 feet deep below the earth. all of his limbs held in place at the very bottom of this.
For fuck's sake. For fuck's sake, dude.
But before I tell you what happens next, ad time. Speaking of people trapped in a cave, World of Tanks. World of Tanks is not only the best game I have ever played, it is the only game I have ever played. It's like cars, but tanks. Picture this. You're a hot new T-34-85M, and you've just joined the battle because some Cromwell B tank-bagged your entire family. It's time for revenge. You must use strategy. You must use stealth. You must use your wits to defeat your enemies. Use long range or short range. It's available on console, but I want you to get it on PC. Imagine a world war, but there are tanks involved this time. Yeah, now you get it. When you've seen as many messed up tanks as I have, you get a little cynical about it. Kid, go up. Floyd has been exploring the caves of Kentucky since he was merely 6 years old.
What year
and as he
was
grew
this?
up, he gained a reputation for being a very daring caver. He would dive into some hole on one side of town and emerge miles
Oh, it was 1925.
away on someone else's property.
Sup?
He grew up and he became embroiled in the Kentucky Cave Wars. Now, there's way too much to go into here, but the summary version is, there's this huge network of interconnected caves called Mammoth Caves. It's actually the largest cave system in the world. And there's a city right in the middle of it, Cave City, real name. So of course, there are dozens of cave entrances on private property all over the place. Now, farmland in this region has very poor soil, and things do not grow well here. So, cave tourism as a source of income quickly became the prominent thing. However, a problem. There are a very large number of caves, but there are only a limited number of tourists. So competition rapidly escalated. Visit my cave. No. Visit my cave. Big signs were erected.
Do they actually own any of these caves? Like, it's property? It was on their land. Well, this is 1 hour 10 minutes. We might watch it. We'll check out if the overage queues are actually 20,000 or not for Eve.
However, a problem. There are a very large number of caves, but there are only a limited number of tourists. So competition rapidly escalated.
I was at 30k.
Visit my cave. No. Visit my cave. Big signs were erected saying, tourists, come to me. Mine is definitely open. Mine is the best. But then competitors would respond by saying, hey, by the way, we're open, but don't go to that one over there. It's really shitty. In fact, it's dangerous. This kept going further. By the end, they were blocking off the trail to each other's property, beating each other in the streets, and hiring people called cappers who would dress up as policemen and tell tourists, no, you can't go in there. That one? No, it's illegal. Despite the fierce competition, Floyd found a cave on his property and he started advertising it to tourists. Of course, very few came. All right, he thought, what if I found something really special and unique? Then surely people would have to come to my cave to see it. So he kept exploring and exploring until he found this hollow. It was filled with big gypsum crystals, and when you were in there, it felt like a completely alien world. But it was barely accessible. This small tunnel is the only way in. He would need to dig for months to open it up to tourists, but he knew he could do it. Back to the competition. They knew the value of this cave. They knew the potential, they wanted it for themselves, and they wanted Collins gone. One time, 5 of them just wandered onto Floyd's property and demanded he hand over the lease. When he refused, they just started beating the shit out of him. This only stopped when Floyd's brother, Homer, marched out with a shotgun and chased them all off. But Floyd was not deterred. He spent 12 hours a day, every day, for months, clearing gravel and stone, chipping away at that passage. He would open it up to tourists, make his cave an incredible attraction, and make his dreams come true.
Or so we thought.
Is anyone there?
So there's Floyd in the dark, yelling out for help. He's at the start of a very tiring loop. Sleep, wake, yell. Sleep, wake, yell. Hours passed. His voice gave in. Arms tingled numb. Pain radiating up his ankle. Here he remained in the dark for the next 23 hours.
Motherfucker.
Quickly you might wonder, how come no one's come for him after 23 hours? Well, Sand Cave resides on a 200-acre farm. There are several homes on this property with other families. One of them, of course, is Colin's house, where Floyd's father, Lee, resides. Now, Lee and Floyd constantly get into fights about how to run things. Lee wants his son to concentrate on farming, and Floyd wants to concentrate on cave tourism. Arguments would often get heated. And Lee was also a bit of a drunk. It was doubtful that he would even notice if his son Floyd was missing. Also not helping things, Floyd regularly lodged at 2 other homes on the farm. So when he didn't return to one host, they would presume that he was staying with the other. And, even worse than that, he had recently spent 30 hours in a cave. So disappearing for this length of time wasn't seen as abnormal. Regardless, around the 23-hour mark, a few locals started to suspect that, hey, something might be wrong, and they went to check up on him. And here, they spotted his jacket still hung up. Unusual. They went deeper. However, there was only one person small enough to make it as far as the turnaround room. This was a 17-year-old Jewel Estes. He refused to go into the squeeze, but it was close enough to call Colin's name.
Floyd!
And Collins yelled back.
Yes, I'm here.
Estes emerges from the cave.
Okay, we know he's trapped, and we know where he is.
So, locals started to gather outside. Out of my way, say a bunch of men who would each show up and take turns heading into the cave in an attempt to reach Collins. But once they reached the turnaround room,
Nope.
they would fail to reach him, emerging from the cave, soaked in mud and cursing. Out of my way, they would say as they were heading in the reverse direction. So a few more hours passed. Word would spread around town. Dozens of locals from Cave City started to gather
It was a
outside.
PR stunt.
Floyd in the cave. Oh my god. Floyd in the cave.
Over in Louisville, Floyd's 22-year-old brother, Homer, he gets a phone call.
Hello? I see. My brother. He's trapped in a cave? I'm on my way.
Homer jumps on a coach and makes his way to Floyd's cave. Homer struts up to the scene.
Bro, how is he not
Dozens
dead?
of men are standing around outside.
Oops.
He ignores them all and marches right into the cavern, still wearing his city clothes. He makes his way in, down the chute, through the narrowing passages, down on his hands and knees towards the turnaround room. And when he arrives,
Nope.
he does not hesitate. He squeezes into the hole, scrambles his way through to the ledge on the other side. He sees Floyd below and slides down to meet him.
Floyd!
Sup?
Right, probably wasn't that casual.
Oh, thank God you're here.
Homer took a moment to shine his light around the area and assess the situation. It was not good. This rock formation is going to prove almost impossible to work around. Alright, so let's have a look. Floyd is here. The rock is here, pinning his ankle. He's surrounded by rubble, and there's a pocket of gravel above him ready to fall. However, because this opening is so small, there are only 2 viable ways of reaching Floyd and that gravel. Option 1, the most obvious, feet first. But if you do this, you have to kinda squat, and your own torso obstructs access to the rubble. Otherwise, option 2, come down headfirst. That will give you better access, but you're trying to move hundreds of pounds of gravel upside down. Worse yet, there's barely an inch around Collins on either side, so good luck getting your arm down near Floyd's ankle to actually free him from the wedged rock. Homer calls back to the less daring rescuers standing behind him.
Quickly, some food and drink.
They send it through. He hand-feeds his brother a pint of coffee and a total of 9 sausage sandwiches.
Feeling better?
Much better.
Then, Homer went to task. He began removing rocks and gravel, tiny scoop at a time, with the help of an old syrup can. For the next 8 hours he toiled, first with hands, then, once enough was cleared, using a crowbar to scoop behind his brother, scraping away sharp protrusions as he went. It was slow progress. Virtually futile. As soon as he removed one rock or scoop of gravel, another would tumble from above and land in the new absence. And it was exhausting work. By sunrise, Homer's arms and back were knackered. His lungs burned. He was losing hope. Homer emerged hours later, shivering violently, skin bruised from his fingertips, but the cave barely yielded at all. However, something new. By the time Homer reached outside, he was greeted by a sea of approximately 100 men and women standing around, drinking, squabbling, and talking big game about how they too were going to save Floyd. The press was also present to help people gawk from afar. Now, Homer recuperated at a small tent near the cave's mouth. Strangers immediately crowded around him to ask innocent but, frankly, frustrating questions, and offer unsolicited, obvious advice, as well as wildly impractical solutions. "He should try untying his shoes," said one. "No, we should send him down with a contortionist who's got a mallet and a chisel. We should jerk him off, right guys?" Alright, I made that third guy up, but you get the idea. And they started to argue with each other about their plans. "Hey, how about using dynamite?" One clique formed, insisting that it was a great idea. And another saying, No, the explosion will kill him, and the weight of the new rocks will surely crush him." They fought for a while until they started arguing about gas torches, which will cook him or asphyxiate him, or the gas will poison him. But by far the most common suggestion, of course, was amputation. Never mind that the foot itself was unreachable, and never mind what the blood loss and shock would do to Floyd's weakened body, and never minding even more that Floyd was strongly reluctant to the idea.
"Whatever you do, don't cut my foot off."
All of the squabble would not have gotten on Homer's nerves, except that not one of them would just brave the damn cave and continue shoveling away the gravel. The formula was always the same. Brave heroes go in with food and supplies, then reach the turnaround room and immediately lose their nerve, then dump the food just outside the hole, and then return back outside and go, "Oh, absolutely. No," he says, "Thanks for the food. Thank you so much. Yum yum." No one would go through that squeeze. Dozens more men would try. All of them would fail. February 2nd, 9 a.m. So far, Homer has been the only person to have reached Floyd. And that would continue to be true until... Here we are at the Louisville Courier. There's a spirited young newshawk named William Miller.
How long
He's
does
talking to
the
his boss,
queue
and
take?
he's trying to convince
Do
him
you
it's
guys
a
know
great idea for
roughly
him
what
to
the-
cover the story of
how
the
many-
man trapped in the cave.
Listen up, boss. I'm hearing talk of a man in a cave. He's stuck down there, and I want to get down there too. Get to the nitty-gritty, you hear?
This is an opportunity for some good PR, Miller. I'm in. But I want us to sponsor that rescue. Picture this. Man saved from cave by Louisville Courier, the finest newspaper in the state.
20K,
That'll drum up
30
plenty of
minutes.
business.
24-carat idea, boss. I'll make it happen. I'll get down there toot sweet.
So off Miller goes to Floyd's cave.
Because I think I missed it.
Back over at the cave, Homer
I
is
was at
sitting
500,
outside trying
and
to
now I'm at
recuperate. As Miller
2000.
wanders up,
Because I was on
he
it
glares
before.
at the man in his city clothes and answers every question with either a grunt or a one-word answer.
Yeah. Sure.
Finally, he gestures to Sand Cave.
Listen, You want more information? The hole's right behind me. Why don't you go take a look yourself?
Now, Miller is only 21, but he is a slender and determined man. He takes on the challenge. So he removes his suit, drapes himself in coveralls, and grabs a lamp. Miller slowly enters the cave. He finds himself stepping in puddles and having to correct his balance against the ever-softening walls. These were accumulating problems thanks to the gawkers outside who had lit campfires all around the entrance. That caused snowmelt, and the stable environment of the cave is starting to shift. But Miller makes it further than most. And all that's left is that final squeeze, and he's there. He stops. He takes a moment and decides to call out to Floyd.
Floyd!
Hearing there is someone on the other side, he feels ashamed not to try. So he closes his eyes and moves forward. His slender figure begins inching through. The crystal gypsum cuts into his elbows and tugs at his clothes. He gets snagged. He's spluttering through the pools of muddy water. He stops, collects himself, and pushes on. He can barely inhale. If he gets stuck in here, he can only hope that someone else can come in from behind and pull him out by the legs. But eventually, he makes it through. Fantastic. He's now standing on the edge of a 10-foot pit, and he clumsily bumbles his way down. He sat right next to Floyd, ready to interview him. But Floyd didn't really answer any of his questions. In fact, he was incoherent. At the moment, he is sitting in a pool of water that is 12 degrees, slowly sapping his body temperature. He is dying from exposure. The cold is diminishing Floyd's mental faculties, and he can barely make sentences. So Miller took a few mental notes, and he left. He worked his way back through the squeeze, past the turnaround room, and out into the daylight. He is covered in mud and scratches and numb head to toe. And when Homer saw, his hope reignited. Someone else had made it to Floyd.
You and me. Together, we can get Floyd out of there.
Nope.
If Miller hadn't gone to that cave, there's a good chance that Floyd's story would have remained an obscure footnote in the back pages. But the interviews and first-person accounts gave the audience a glimpse of something real. Fear, hope, desperation, the full range. And so from Los Angeles to New York, Floyd's story was picked up everywhere and described the Kentucky man's plight in sensational detail. It was also the era when radio became a regular feature for regular Americans. Radio allowed something new, hourly updates, letting people get engrossed into the story. So, mostly thanks to Miller, the story of Floyd over the next week would grow and grow, seemingly frothing over into every aspect of American life. The press at large would be clamoring over each other for every little extra scrap of detail they could get about Floyd. And everybody wanted to know, will this man make it?
How is he not dead yet?
Back outside the cave, someone new enters the scene. Lieutenant Robert Burden, a thin but strong 33-year-old Louisville firefighter. Like Miller, he was able to navigate the passages of the cave and brave the squeeze. Scratched up pretty good and drenched in cold, muddy water, he managed to get through.
2000 to 20.
He grabbed the rope and confidently lowered himself to Floyd's position. It was not an optimistic sight. Floyd's condition was deteriorating.
Well, we've got a heck of a problem here, but I think I can get you out with a rope.
Floyd nods in approval.
Go on.
We might just pull your bloody leg off.
Just pull my leg off then. Get me out of here.
Burden returned to the surface and faced the crowd. He announced.
We will attempt a rope pull.
The crowd murmured. It was dangerous. It
That's
would
a
certainly break
long-ass
his
fucking
foot and
rope.
could altogether pull it off. If there are jagged rocks, you'll fell at the poor man. Amongst the crowd, a doctor stepped forward. A rope pull could stretch his internal organs and cause them to rupture. You'll kill him. But Floyd is dying of exposure down there. The situation is becoming desperate. Burden put caution to the side.
The time for strategy is over. Now we try brute force.
Mein Favorit.
We're here. We're gonna get you out of here.
After 79 hours in the cold water, he is delirious.
Now or never. Let's do this.
Alright, we'll save it for the next time you get disconnected. Joke, man. Alright, 200 people queue.
Fading in and out of consciousness. Homer gave his brother some coffee and fed him a couple of ham sandwiches. That warms him up and gives him a bit more energy, and he comes back to lucidity.
Oh, much better.
I'm gonna put the special harness around you. Burden and Miller, they're here too. We got 3 more boys right up the cave.
How the fuck
and
are they
they're
gonna
all
put a
ready to
harness
pull
on
as
him
hard as they
when he's
can to
covered
get
in
you out of
rocks?
here.
Floyd was frightened.
I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna hurt.
He gave his brother some whiskey and a strong sedative to calm his nerves, and also to help him withstand the shock in case his foot is destroyed. Floyd took the opportunity to appreciate being surrounded by friends and family.
Go on. Do it.
Alright, strap him up.
Homer tied the harness around Colin's chest and knotted the rope.
Ready?
Above, Miller is crouched at the top of the pit.
Ready?
Burden clenches the cord from further up the cave.
3,
The rope goes taut.
2,
Do it.
1.
Oh!
Instinctively, Floyd gasps. The force of 6 men pulled against the clutches of the cave. Floyd began to scream. His body was being pulled up from the rubble. The gravel was beginning to shift. Burden clenched his teeth.
Oh, harder!
Floyd screamed harder as well. Now, Floyd was trapped in a supine position, but the direction of the rope caused an upwards force that wrenched him vertically. His torso was being compressed and bent against the ceiling of the trap. It would kill him. Floyd's screaming intensified, and through gasps was begging them to stop. The screams filled the echoing cave, but it did not stop. The agony continued, on and on, with no progress.
Enough! Enough! You guys are killing him!
Homer pulled
I
in the
said
opposite
stop.
direction to give his brother some reprieve. Somehow, Homer mustered the strength to altogether wrench the cord from the other men's hands. The rope went slack. Homer, Floyd, and the rope lay limp on the cave floor, panting and exhausted. No progress had been made. The cave would not let this man go. The futility of the situation sank in, and all they could do was leave for now and reassess. Everybody was shaken by the experience. Burden fainted as he crawled towards the exit. Most of the other men had to be carried away. Outside, the crowd had grown to 200. They buzzed and asked useless questions, and Homer walked dejectedly past them. He sat by thinking what he could do. The cause seemed hopeless.
Homer?
Then, someone showed up who could turn things around. He looked up to see a childhood friend of both his and Floyd's, Johnny Gerald. Gerald knew more about cave rescues than most. In fact, just that summer prior, he had helped untangle Floyd from a different snag. He was just the man for the job.
Alright, let me go see him. Well, look who it is.
Floyd perked up immediately,
Yay.
thrilled to see Gerald.
Alright, let's see what we can do.
Gerald jumped down. For the next 3 hours, Gerald went back to the original plan of prying away rocks. His stamina was good, and progress was surprisingly good as well. For several more hours, he continued, just moving stone after stone. New one would fall in its place, and he'd move that one too. By midnight, he had enough room to shift position and clear some of the gravel that was at each side of Floyd's body. Gerald would spend several more hours scooping. And it worked. For the first time, Floyd's torso was now available. Then his hips, his upper thigh. For the first time in over 90 hours, Floyd was able to wiggle his arms, his hips, and even that trapped right leg, though it was very painful to do. In that one session, Gerald managed to move a half-ton of rock, but there was still a lot more to go. And that rock by his foot was still holding him in place. By 2 a.m., Gerald was spent. He needed rest, and he was ready to head back outside.
Floyd, tomorrow, you're gonna be a free man.
Now here you might think that things will become straightforward. They did not. Now that space had been cleared, Burden became convinced that if he could get down that passage again, he could free Floyd with another rope pull, fate deciding with both feet or just one. But when Burden tried to enter the cave again, he was sternly rebuffed by the locals. They were playing gatekeeper. They had been specifically instructed to not let anyone in, and they were especially opposed to Burden making another rope pull after word spread about the disaster of the first attempt. He tried to reason with them.
Let me try the rope pull again. It'll work this time.
They wouldn't let up. Instead, they shouted obscenities and shoved him in the other direction. Meanwhile, Gerald and Homer are incapacitated with exhaustion, and Miller was busy filing some paperwork for the Louisville Courier. Nobody else had the ability or the authority to take action, so Floyd spent all of that morning alone.
Hello? Is anyone there? Help!
Ugh.
Hey!
Lying there with insects and stuff, and you cannot move, like crawling on your
Word spread about Floyd.
face.
Miller's reporting had been picked up by the AP Newswire, and they distributed it amongst their hundreds of partnered newspapers. For Miller, it would be the biggest moment of his career. But he didn't stop to pay it mind. He spent the day hatching a rescue plan. Miller descended into the cave and set to work. When he entered, he found that the team before him had strung light bulbs all through the cavern, leading all the way down to Floyd. Very handy. A bulb was also put around Floyd's neck to keep him warm and make sure that he was never again left in the dark. Miller popped down to Floyd.
Ah, Floyd! Fancy seeing you here, buddy.
Reusing that syrup tin, he started offloading gravel into buckets. Those buckets were then passed up and down the cavern. And so it went on for the next 2 hours. Miller stopped for a break. He took some bread, milk, and whiskey, and sharing it with Floyd, they started to get to talking. Floyd had been in that cave for over 100 hours now, and seeing everyone working together, Floyd was overcome with a sense of hope and relief, and so he began spilling his heart out to Miller. Here is what he is quoted in the newspaper.
I believed I would go to heaven. I can feel that I'm to be taken out alive and with both my feet. I kept thinking, what would happen if the rock above me would fall? It caused me to shudder. I kept thinking to drive my mind to something else, but it wasn't much use. I couldn't do much to help those who came to help me, but I knew that a lot of people were willing to do all in their power. It gave me courage. Tuesday morning, I thought to myself, 4 days down here, and no nearer freedom than I was on the first day. How will it end? Will I get out? I couldn't think of it. I have faced death before. It doesn't frighten me, but it is so long. Tell them I am not going to give up. Tell them I'm going to fight and be patient and never forget them.
Meanwhile, Floyd's story kept growing. Pedestrians would gather around corner store windows to read the latest bulletins. The press began using giant typefaces, commonly only reserved for declarations of war. Churches in all of the nearby counties were holding services for Floyd. Theaters even interrupted their shows to update the audience. Now, at the time, President Coolidge was in charge, and his Secretary of Commerce was a geologist, Herbert Hoover. Now, Mr. Hoover followed the story very closely, and so it was likely that the president did too. Even Congress paused session to ask about the latest news from Sand Cave. By the end, the Floyd Collins incident would explode into the third largest non-political story between World War I and World War II. All of this excitement brought an inundation of people to Cave City. Old population, 690. Yawn. New population, 10,000. Hotels ran out of food. Residents turned their homes into makeshift hotels, charging sizable premiums to let people nap in their bathtubs. The banks quickly ran out of on-hand cash, and 4,500 automobiles impatiently sat backed up for 2 miles from 20 different states to drive onto the Collins farm and turn their pristine green pastures into swampy parking lots. Deep below all those tourists, There's Miller, trying to free Floyd. Alright, a little bit of setup. Floyd, Miller,
I
some
mean, they
remaining
can't
rubble.
see anything.
For
Like,
anyone to
why-
lift the
what is
rock by
point?
hand would be impossible because Floyd's
They're
body
just standing outside a
obstructs
cave.
the hole. Miller grabs a crowbar and shoves it through the gap. Now he's going to lever it
cares?
off Floyd's foot. Cool. The crowbar is now wedged against the rock. Next, he takes a jack. He positions it on top of the crowbar so that it will be forced against the ceiling. However, problem. That jack is too big. It doesn't fit. Miller yells up the tunnel for a smaller one, but this took some time. And when it arrived, too small, won't reach the ceiling. But instead of sending for another one, Miller takes 2 blocks of wood and bolsters them underneath the crowbar. Right, so the crowbar now sits higher, it fulcrums against the blocks, and the jack is sitting on top. All Miller has to do is expand the jack, which he will
hurt
do
his leg,
using
though.
this spanner, holding it at the very tips of his fingers. Sounds easy. It's not. But that's the plan. Let's get him out of there. He turned the wrench, the jack expanded, and the crowbar took strain. The whole thing slid apart with a pang. Floyd wasn't hurt, but Miller was contorting and exerting his whole body from back to fingertip. They tried again. Same result. Miller tried a new angle. Maybe this time. The jack pressed. The tension increased. And this time, the rock moved. It fucking moved. With each turn, the stone shifted a little more. Miller's hands shook with adrenaline, his face and body dripping with sweat. Pang. One of the blocks slipped, and the wooden tower went sideways. The rock painfully slammed back down on Colin's foot.
You'll get it next time, Miller. Try again.
Miller did. Again. And again. Adding blocks, taking them away, new crowbar position, changed the jack position, every angle, all while Floyd was there, cheering him on.
Yay.
For the next 4 hours he tried. No.
Yeah.
Progress. Miller was exhausted. He couldn't do this on his own, but he was the only one slim enough to get in through the gap. The group decided to concede for now and return to the surface. They would take just a small break, but it looked to everyone like there was a clear way to get this man out. So Miller and Burden crawled back through the mud and the wines of the cave. As they made their way through, the cave was visibly sagging. The ceiling seemed lower. Parts were harder to navigate than before, especially now with their bruised and purple hands. But they made it outside to the fresh, early morning air. And here is where they're greeted with a new sight. Dozens of soldiers. The National Guard had arrived. In addition to the National Guard, a new figure was joining the story, Henry Carmichael. Now, Carmichael was the general superintendent of the Kentucky Rock Asphalt Company. He had been on site since Tuesday, and he was appalled at how primitive the rescue attempts had been.
Carmichael, also known as Professor Carr.